Now that book convention season is back, we need to talk about protecting your intellectual property when it comes to these events. Whether you are an author attending these events or you are a creator of an event, we want to make sure that we are legally protecting you and making sure the IP of you and the other authors involved are protected as we move forward. So today we're talking to everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to learn more.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Now that we're starting to see more and more book events come back to life after everything that's been going on in the world, I want to talk a little bit about people who are jumping into the world of creating book signings, book events, book conventions, and how they can protect their intellectual property when it comes to creating these events. So, Tony, what do we need to know?
So the first thing to know is when you create any type of event, like, let's say if it's a small signing or a major signing, just being aware of what IP do you want to highlight. So, for example, is it going to be, I'm assuming that you would want to have, I would hope to God you do, you want to have your book cover on display out there. So, obviously being mindful of when you're doing that, who's the copyright owner of the book cover. Was it a work for hire situation where you hired an artist to do the work on your behalf? Was there an assignment of copyright ownership over to you after that product was completed? Does that belong to the publisher that you're working with? And if so, does the publisher grant you rights to publicly display that type of book cover in a public setting like that? That's going to be really important because you can't just assume that you have the IP rights to everything, even though you wrote the book or did the whole thing. So that would be important. Then I think, understanding, again, going back to like the rights, right? Like if you wrote the book, understanding what parameters you have to recite the book. A recitation of a book is essentially a public performance of that book. So, more likely than not, maybe your publisher agreement is going to lay out the terms of like what kind of media junkets or book signings exist. And so you would probably have to have certain provisions laid out that say that you have the right to, let's say, do a live reading of a portion of a book. You could do a Q&A, so on and so forth. So making sure that all that is laid out, because at the end of the day, yes, you invested time into the book, but depending on how your publishing agreement is drafted, you want to make sure that you're not violating any sort of copyright that belongs to the publisher, even if maybe it's a joint ownership between you and the publisher. Typically, more likely than not, the publisher always owns the rights, but you just want to make sure that you're dotting your I's, you're crossing your T's, and reviewing whatever, again, parameters you have in your publisher agreement is going to be important. And then, I think this is a bit more of like a fun one, but what if you had somebody that was recording video for you? Let's say you're very proud of this moment, and so you want somebody to record video of you signing books, taking pictures with fans, so on and so forth. Understanding that even that creation of that social media content, while it's amazing and it can make for a great reel or TikTok video or what have you, at the end of the day, whoever was behind the camera taking that video owns that copyright. So just, if it's a buddy of yours, you don't have to formalize it. It would be funny, but you could just say, hey, do I have permission to use this in my videos? And I think just even having that friendly exchange with your friend, asking for permission would be great. Now, I think you can kind of bend the rules if, let's say, your friend were using your camera to capture all of this, because at the end of the day, that's your phone. You're kind of giving them a license, if you will, to capture that moment for you on your behalf. That type of formalized permission is not necessary in a situation like that. But if it's somebody else's camera that is capturing that, that's where the permission, I think, is more appropriate for sure. So I think that those are kind of like the headlines of essentially the main types of things to keep in mind when you're doing a book signing. Of course, one thing to keep in mind is if, let's say, fans were to upload content on social media, just being mindful that you just can't, obviously you could take a post and repost it in Instagram stories because that's allowed. That's part of the terms of service. You just can't, let's say, take a screenshot from a fan's Instagram and just upload it onto your page as if it were your own. So asking even your fans who captured moments from your book signing for permission is a very kosher way of going about, getting permission to help share what happened in a very special moment like a book signing.
And of course, we know it's incredibly important to make sure we are getting that permission, especially if it does involve other people creating content on our behalf. And so as we are working at these different book conventions or these different book events, we want to be noting what we do and do not have permission to do in terms of our own books. If you are indie published, you're good to go. If you're traditionally published, check with your publisher.
Yes.
You want to make sure if you're doing readings, if you're having conversations where you are looking at the content of the books, that again, you are covered with your contract or you have permission from your traditional publisher to do these things. And if we are creating these events, we want to make sure we are protecting the events as a whole as well. So Tony, when it comes to creating an event where we're pulling in multiple authors to do these things, is there anything that the host should be aware of for protecting the intellectual property of the event itself?
I think having negotiations with the authors is going to be very important in terms of what they will allow and will not allow. So having those terms memorialized. So for example, let's say you have a convention where you bring in 10 authors. Obviously, each of those authors are going to probably have different stipulations, especially if they have an audience of different size, each of them. So maybe more indie published authors are going to be, a bit more carefree. Probably the bigger ones are going to be like super adamant about certain provisions laid out and what conditions they want in order to be there. But even so, when you have those negotiations with those authors, laying out very explicit language about what you're allowed, what permissions do you have to showcase their IP? What can you do in a public setting like that? Yeah, I think we often overlook the fact that, yes, if it's a convention and even if the authors are coming in to read their books or showcase whatever products they've created, their IP is still at play here and rights are still at play. You don't want to violate anybody's rights. So even public performance of those books, aka book readings or anything that is a public performance of that book, you want to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to potentially raise a red flag. Because let me put it to you this way: even if it's 50 people at a convention and one of those people posts a video and uploads it on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, it's out there now. Now millions of people are seeing it. Now the public performance of 50 people has expanded, has proliferated into something much bigger. And that could raise a red flag and that could cause maybe a trigger of some type of violation. So, I think having good organizational skills, and I think even working with an attorney to just making sure that you've got everything squared away in order in terms of what you need to ask and what you need to negotiate appropriately for with every author is going to be very, very important.
I think that's a really good point that a lot of people don't think about. When we are creating events like this, oftentimes we just feel like we can pull everybody in. We can do the things in our terms of service to kind of cover us. We make sure we talk to the venues and all these things. But I don't feel like a lot of people think to bring in an attorney to make sure everything is legally protected and covered, because we don't often think that we need to have specific things in our contracts with those authors. So that's an incredibly valuable point. Always work with a lawyer. And that should be our catchphrase for this entire series.
I'm telling you, listen, lawyers aren't that bad. We're pretty good people.
They're fun. Lawyers are fun. All the lawyers I hang out with are fun. I'm just saying, guys, if you don't have a publishing entertainment lawyer, get one. They're the best people to have on your team. I'm just saying. If you have further questions on making sure that we are legally protecting intellectual property during things like book signings and book conventions, go ahead and drop those questions down below. Tony is coming back for more episodes, so if you have questions in the legal realm of the publishing industry, now is the time to let us know. And as always, you can reach out to Tony on his social media, where he is actively engaging with you to get your questions answered in real time. So Tony, where can everybody reach out to you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor, and you can check out my brand new entertainment law podcast, End Scene, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Have more legal questions? Drop those down below. Tony's coming back for more episodes to make sure we're staying legally protected inside of this industry. And every single day, we are dropping videos to help you level up inside of the publishing world so you can be more profitable this year. We're talking about navigating the world of social media, tech and gear to help you level up. We're going to be talking about publishing and writing. We're bringing in experts just like Tony and other authors to help you make sure that you are on track for the best success you can have this year. So hit that subscribe and notification bell, and we'll see you in the next episode.